Okay, so The Ark in Space is a great episode. It is one of my favorites. It sticks in my memory. It's not as epic and big as, say, like Genesis of the Daleks, or as well renowned as, say, Pyramid of Mars or City of Death or anything like that, but it's just a really good, solid, spooky story. This story is the beginning of the Philip Hinchcliffe era for real. The last story was the beginning of his time as showrunner, but he really was following the lead of Terrence Dicks and the previous crew as they segued into the new era. Whereas I feel like this story is the one where Philip Hinchcliffe really was allowed to start to crystallize his vision for where the show could go. He loved the show before he became the showrunner, but he wanted to take the show and elevate it a little bit in the adult maturity side of things. Not that John Pertwee's era was not adult or mature. I feel like John Pertwee's era covered a lot of real world topics, and I appreciate that. You know, they had episodes that talked about environmental disasters, they had episodes that wrestled with the morality of taking on an enemy that was threatening genocide and then responding with your own form of slaughter. It dealt with a lot of adult issues in an interesting way. But I feel like what Philip Hinchcliffe wanted to do was bring a slight elevation of emotional realism and character-centric depth to the stories. And I think this story, The Ark in Space, is the first one that is really a good example of that vision coming to life. The story is written by Robert Holmes, who is hands down the best classic Doctor Who writer. There's a lot of great Doctor Who writers, but Robert Holmes is the guy who penned a lot of the biggest classics, a lot of my personal favorite stories of all time. He just had the knack. He knew how to write the kind of Doctor Who story that I love, which is essentially a story that is extremely character focused, where all of the new characters that are introduced to the story have an arc and a theme to their journey that ties in with the larger social or science fiction issue that the story is talking about and brings you along emotionally for the ride. It does what every good horror story does, which is makes you care about the characters. So when they die, it hits you as a viewer. And this story does that fabulously. It's so economical in its storytelling. It really beautifully ties together the overarching theme of the story with the alien threat and with all the characters' arcs and journeys. It's a very poignant story. It deals with humanity and how even under the most dire of situations, humanity will always rise up and fight for survival. A human individual will fight for something larger than themselves in order to preserve their people, their society, so that they can continue on. And this story is all about that. The Ark in Space is literally a space Noah's Ark of humanity attempting to outlast the death of Earth, then having to contend with not only that trauma, but an even greater threat of an alien that wants to destroy and absorb all of the remaining survivors. Just the first episode alone so concisely delivers so much world building and feeds in the threat piece by piece by piece, while simultaneously weaving in what's at stake and what the history of the world is, all coming together, interweaving organically amongst exciting action sci-fi horror set pieces. It's just written by a pro. It's penned by an old hand who knows what Doctor Who is, knows what he likes to tell stories about. Robert Holmes loves horror, and he loves interesting characters, and he loves double acts, and he loves possession stories. He loves stories about someone turning into something else and losing their mind and fighting against some horrific alien threat that's transforming their body and their mind, and how does someone contend with that? You know, it's disturbing stuff for, you know, a quote-unquote children's story, and it really keeps you on the edge of your seat. It keeps you pinned. It keeps you wanting to know more. It keeps presenting mysteries and having you, the audience, want to know the answers to the mysteries. And then, over the course of the next 3 episodes, very satisfyingly rolling out the answers to the mysteries one by one, or tying in the questions of the mysteries to direct actions the heroes can take for the entire rest of the story. So it's just smart writing. It's a really smartly written story. The other thing about the story is that it has what some would consider extremely dated, wonky special effects, the infamous use of bubble wrap, to represent the monsters. And nowadays, as someone who regularly receives, Amazon packages wrapped in the exact same material, I can't help but watch it and, laugh and smile at the clearly fake alien monsters. Nonetheless, I feel like the direction and the mostly minimal, quick shots of things really work in its favor. And I think it's a spooky, creepy story anyway, in spite of it. In summation, I'll get into everything in more detail, but I will just say this story is very tightly written. It builds a authentic sense of dread and rising stakes throughout the story. All the actors are on point. They all deliver, even in the most ridiculous of scenarios with the most chintzy of effects, they deliver an authentic, powerful, believable performance. And the theme of the story, the overarching theme, I feel like it's earnest, it's true, it's meaningful and timely, and it delivers what it promises in episode 1. It pays off and ties up nicely in the end and pulls everything together. And then on top of that, it just does what I love about Doctor Who the best, which is a scary, weird alien story that also makes you think. And is very entertaining and fun. It just does all that so well. So let's get into it. Let's talk about The Ark in Space, one of the best Tom Baker stories. The true start of the Philip Hinchcliffe era, where the showrunner gets to really start to put his darker, more adult and mature and otherworldly mark on the show. It's a great statement of purpose episode. This episode was very successful in its time, and I think really set off Tom Baker and the Philip Hinchcliffe era on the right foot. Let's get into it. Let's talk about the cast. We got Tom Baker coming back for his second turn. The robot's cool, and he's obviously, like I've raved about his introductory scene. I really like his final scene with Sarah, but he's very base level Tom Baker in that story. It's just a lot of introducing his vibe and his sense of humor and his energy, but you don't really get to dig into him. He's really not super challenged. He kind of breezes through that whole situation. Because come on, let's be honest. The Doctor versus an earthbound, human-made robot. Dude can do that in his sleep. Robot was not a huge challenge for the Doctor, and I think we kind of see that. This story is the one where we get to see the Doctor truly challenged in a desperate life or death situation that brings out a lot of his deeper feelings about humanity in general. And it also emphasizes and underlines what an alien person he is, which is another thing Philip Hinchcliffe wanted to focus upon. The idea that he's not human. He's fond of humans. He obviously really likes humans, and it's very charming how much he is into humanity. But he's an alien with hundreds of years of life experience and hundreds, if not thousands, of other planets and civilizations and time periods that he's visited. As charming and down to earth and kind of father figure-y / action man as John Pertwee was. I love John Pertwee. But Tom Baker brings a whole other, much more alien energy, a much more unpredictable energy to the Doctor that I think really gives the show this much needed shot in the arm. One moment he seems very grouchy and mean, almost Eccleston-esque, like looking down upon humanity, being irritated and impatient with them and how slow they are and how clumsy they are and how they don't come to his conclusions as quickly as he does. But he also has a couple of really great lines and some great speeches he makes during the story that emphasize how fond he is of humanity as a whole, how impressed he is by us, which obviously we're humans, we're watching the show. I think the viewer can't help but be a little bit, taken in by his his fawning over humanity. Because you buy it. You buy he's like this hundreds-year-old alien who's seen it all, done it all. But he goes into that room, he walks into, first of all, amazing introductory shot of the cryogenic chamber. But he walks in there and we're a little awed as viewers, and then he's awed as the Doctor. He makes that amazing speech about the indomitability of humanity. It's his first great speech, and it's almost Shakespearean, just the way he delivers it.
Homo sapiens. What an inventive, invincible species. It's only a few million years since they crawled up out of the mud and learned to walk. Puny, defenseless bipeds. They've survived flood, famine, and plague. They've survived cosmic wars and holocausts. Now Here they are, out among the stars, waiting to begin a new life, ready to outsit eternity. They're indomitable. Indomitable.
It sets the tone of the story. It sets up what is at stake with the story, and it gives you this other side of this doctor we haven't seen yet. He has a line later where he says,
"It may be irrational of me, but human beings are quite my favorite species."
I love when, as things get more and more intense, he starts to get more and more desperate, and he's trying to think of the answer to things more quickly. And you can see it in his face. You can see it in his performance. He gets very grinny and kind of manic in the eyes. And he comes off as somebody who is both desperate and very quickly realizing all the things the Wirrn can do now that they have the control of the ship and how slim their chances are. But he's also simultaneously thinking of solutions and thinking of ways to outsmart them and playing like lightning fast chess with them in his head. You can see that he's scared, but also excited and relishing that he has this challenge to overcome because he knows he can do it. Possibly. But he also knows he could die, and he also knows they could all die, and he understands the stakes. He needs to save humanity. For all he knows, in this time period, this is the last life raft of humanity. He realizes at this point that he is key to not only his survival and his friend's survival, but potentially the survival of the whole human race, which he's expressed a few times as a people that he is not willing to step away from, a people that he is very fond of. So he has all these different colors. I love his back and forth with Harry. They really build up the fun energy between him and Harry. Harry shows up. He's already pressed the wrong button, which is how they got there. And he presses another wrong button, which almost suffocates Sarah. And you could tell the doctor is very irritated with him. And Harry's kind of a bumbling fool for a little bit. I mean, it's not really his fault. He didn't even know he was going to another planet, another time period. They have that really fun, he doesn't like him, but he kind of likes him. And he's annoyed by him doing things wrong, but then Harry does come through if you give him the right directive and tell him what to do. Harry can be very helpful. Harry's a medical officer. Harry can help revive the people while the doctor goes off to do other things. Harry can help him throw the chute. And he gets impressed when Harry has the idea that it's a lifeboat. It's a great line.
I say, it couldn't be some sort of survival kit, could it?
Survival?
Yes, the sort of thing they shove in lifeboats and things.
You're improving, Harry.
Am I really?
Yes, your mind is beginning to work. It's entirely due to my influence, of course. You mustn't take any credit.
It's passive-aggressively mean, but it's also weirdly affectionate, which is a lot of what Tom Baker does with Harry, and it's kind of it's a fun dynamic between the two. We get more of that developing relationship. Sarah, Sarah is, at this point, she's a very reliable actor. She knows how to play her character. She's been on the show for already a season, which is a feisty, irascible young woman who's very smart and will get the job done, but can also get emotionally overwhelmed by things. I like the scene where she's trapped in the tube and she starts to get a little bit overwhelmed. And the doctor kind of essentially, he starts insulting her to make her angry so that she pulls herself out of the tube so she can kick its ass, which is kind of hilarious. I don't know. He's kind of basically negging her into the correct action she needs to take to be the hero. The thing is, I feel like it's authentically reflects both of their characters. The doctor, Tom Baker's doctor, being ultimately a morally good person, but often does morally questionable or alien actions to get from point A to point B. He also, at another point, just simply says, we're not leaving because the humans here need to be saved. So you, Harry and Sarah, you're with me. So you all need to risk your life, just like I'm risking my life to save these people. And they're just all right, I guess we gotta do it. He's the boss.
Well, that settles us.
There is a sort of domineering, controlling energy between them. It does seem like when Sarah is I'll climb through the air ducts, the doctor gives her the huge grin and he's good girl, Sarah. And he's really encouraging her. He clearly was waiting for her to volunteer to help in his crazy scheme. And she clearly really wants to please him and impress him. So there's a little bit of that, not necessarily entirely positive relationship between the two of them. So let's talk about the guest cast. The two primary characters in this story are Wirrn, the head medtech, and Noah, their leader. Both these actors put in excellent performances. Wirrn is the introduction to this race and these people, and she perfectly embodies this combination of a cold, calculating, no nonsense, no time for, as she said, romanticism, emotions, empathy, sympathy, no time for any of that. It's all about survival with her. Very understandable when you learn about the backstory of these characters. She was around during the end of days, like all of humanity died. They only picked a few hundred people to continue on, and they picked the best of the best, and they picked the people who were the most likely to survive. They were the most likely to succeed when they're reawakened later. So you need someone who she's no nonsense. She has no time for it. She's just like, I am the med officer. I will do everything I can to make this person survive. This person will live or die. It is what it is. I've seen so much death and destruction in my life. This is just the way we are. But at the same time, her humanity and her empathy just shines through. She's cold, but she's like, yeah, I'll help. You know, you guys want me to help Sarah here. I'm a med tech. That's fine. You know, she'll live or die. There you go. But I did the best thing I could do.
She will either survive or die.
She clearly has little moments of poignant sadness as she sees her leader, who she obviously looked up to, who was supposed to be her mate, so she probably was in love with him, transform into this monster. She has a sadness about her that kind of permeates in little lines of dialogue throughout the story.
Noah and I were pair bonded for the new life.
But she also is very practical, as a matter of fact, and she takes the lead instantly. Even though, as the doctor says, humanity is very compartmentalized at this time, she expands her role from being just a head med tech to being the leader of their society, and she slides right into it and is able to give smart, concise, essential commands when she's called on to do that. So she's a really interesting character. She's likable, which is hard to do because she comes off very elitist and mean to our heroes that we like at the start. But you almost instantly are like, I get it. She's a different person from a different planet. These are weird strangers, and her goals are positive and good. Her goals are the survival of humanity. She has no ego. You know, she doesn't have any like other weird chip on her shoulder. She's just very matter of fact. So she's great. Noah is interesting because Noah shows up. He gets revived, and he's almost instantly a dick. Again, you get it. They don't have time for sympathy or to open themselves up to potentially suspicious weirdos that just showed up on their ship. Like, I get it. I get his point of view. But he's totally a dick. He's like, these impurities. Oh, who are these regressives? Who the fuck are these guys? We should eliminate them immediately.
No regressive? Here? I'm no regressive. I'm a naval officer.
And he does seem a little bit like he's the kind of guy who, he's the leader, maybe not because he's the best leader. Maybe he's the leader because he's the most bossy and assertive. Because when he hears the doctors in the stacks and he goes to check it out, he doesn't give the guy the time of day to explain what's going on. He just shoots him in a very pig-headed manner. He goes and checks out the danger that he was warned about, and that seals his fate. He gets slimed and he starts to transform. His performance while he's transforming is really good. I think this actor was given some extremely difficult material to work with. Not the dialogue necessarily. It's very chilling when his mind is altering and he's like, we must shut down the pods, and it's confusing and he's kind of thrown off Vira, and then he suddenly transforms and he thinks he's Dune. Like, he does all that really well. It's a very chilling scene.
We need the technical crew now to operate the station.
Yes. No! No, the plan has changed. No, hear me. Hear me, the plan has changed.
No, what is it? Is it something to do with June?
Dune.
Technician Dune. I reported him missing.
But I'm here. Found you.
What?
As an actor, I imagine it was extremely challenging for him to have to deal with believably, emotionally putting himself in the right state to deal with green bubble wrap arm. You know, that is some Oscar-worthy performance on his part, to like act like this thing worming around. His arm is not in his control, and that bubble wrap is alien skin, and it's like actually hard to fight against and terrifying. Even as a kid, I remember watching that scene and being like, man, this looks really hard for this guy. But he's doing it. Like, I'm believing that he is being mind controlled by the bubble wrap arm. Like, I'm buying it. That scene's a little silly looking, but I think he does a great job delivering his dialogue and his performance in that scene. Moving forward, as he becomes more and more encased in the green alien goo, I think he really slides into the mental decay of the character. It's one of the highlights of the story. It's very horrifying and disturbing to watch. The final scene where he leads all the other Wirrn onto the ship and flies off, and then he says goodbye, Vyra, and blows it up. This is a perfect conclusion to his character arc. It ties in directly with the rest of the story. It shows how even when his body was being destroyed and taken over, his mind was being destroyed and taken over by the villains, and yet there was still that shred of humanity, that indomitable shred of humanity in him that shines through and is able to overcome even the most insane and alien and aggressive of obstacles and redeem himself and do what is right for his people. He dies a hero. And you want that for him. It's a great performance because he starts off, you immediately don't like him when he first shows up, but by the end of it you feel extreme sympathy for him, and you hope that he's able to do something good to overcome, even though he is the voice of the villains for most of the story. So he does great. The other actors, they come and go very quickly. They're kind of like cannon fodder, but they're still fun. Nibri does just fine for the short amount of screen time that he has. He was well cast. He has a very innocent, wide-eyed look to him. His job was to be terrified by the image he saw of the Wirrn, to not be able to shoot his commanding officer, and then to get killed. One thing about him is he dies by T-posing. Nibri T-poses as he dies, which I thought was very odd. I don't know what the drive was to do that, but it looked funny. So, the other guys, Lysick and Rogan, they're a fun double act. Lysick doesn't get a ton of screen time. He dies pretty quick, but Rogan is a much-needed, fun jolt of humor, cynical humor, and energy to the story. So I like his bit he has to play.
Oh, beautiful. We should have taken our chance with the solar flares and gone into the thermic shelters. We'd have been happily dead by now.
There's no bad actors in the story. For the role they have, they deliver what needs to happen, and the two primary people, Vyra and Noah, give great performances that I think help make the story feel very memorable and very solid, and sell that whole feeling that Hinchcliffe was going for, of a little bit more depth and nuance to the character journeys, and tying the character journeys into the horror of the story so that you feel it more viscerally. So great cast. Okay, so let's move on to the part that's the most fun to talk about, I think, which is the monster effects and just the general special effects overall. I know that you watch this as a modern viewer, and you probably immediately notice that everything is green bubble wrap. There's no escaping that. There's no ignoring that. The alien in his pupa stage, and when he's crawling around as a grub, or he's a weird blobby eyeball in the stacks, or when he is wrapped around Noah's arm, is all very clearly made out of bubble wrap that's been spray painted green and mixed with cellophane. And yeah, it is what it is. In their defense, at the time, as Philip Hinchcliffe has said, if you were someone who worked in production, you knew what bubble wrap was. But the common folks, it was fairly new, so the average viewer had never seen bubble wrap before. It hadn't become this ubiquitous shipping box buffer that it is today. So they thought, like, this will look alien, this will look weird. And to be fair, it does look a little wonky, it looks a little silly, but I think that the bubble wrap is charming. The bubble wrap is an invitation to you as the viewer to use your imagination to fill in the gaps and be like, that's not bubble wrap. That is scaly, bubbly, alien bug skin. You just gotta go with it, because they take the bubble wrap monsters and the prosthetics and the costuming deadly serious in this story. And I think it's for the best, because they don't show it that much. I think it's very well utilized, just quick cuts, distant shots, and you see something duck into a grate really fast. I think it's very effective for most of the story. It's practical, it's creative. They really are helping you along with cool camera work and great music and really authentic, believable reactions from the actors. They sell it. They sell the dread, they sell the fear. The grub breaks through the door and you're like, don't touch it! Don't touch it or you turn out like Noah. It's creepy. And just the concept of it, the idea that these monsters lay an egg that grows and then eats you and then absorbs your whole personality and your memories and everything and adds it to their hive mind. Or they can slime you and you turn into one of them and literally transform into a giant wasp creature. It's a horrifying idea. And the wasp costumes, they look cool. when they're not well lit. Unfortunately, specifically in episode 4, the finale of the story, the bright lighting of the set works against the Wasp costumes a little bit, because you just get a lot of shots of someone very obviously walking around in this awkward suit in bright lighting. And it does look better when they go to the stacks, which has moodier lighting, and you see the Wasp creature there. But again, these are minor nitpicks because I think the story is so strong and the threat feels so real by the end of it that you just buy it. It all gels together just fine. The electric effects look cool. The electric bolt that comes out of the energy booby trap, the energy blasts that are hitting Noah when they're shooting him, that looks cool, like the electricity shooting off of him. The set design itself is really, really good. They were going for this really sterile, clean, brightly lit environment, which completely makes sense with the idea that this is humanity's survival arc, so why would it be gloomy and dark? You know, it's kind of a 2001-esque aesthetic, and I think that really works for most of it. I think the set looks gorgeous. The cryogenic chamber is really impressive. It's big, it's clean. The hallway or the room with the botanical area in it, all the sets really stand up. Even the sliding doors, whoever's pulling the ropes did a really good job of sliding those doors up and down smoothly so that it feels like this technologically advanced minimal space station. I don't notice any wobbles in the set. It looks good. The space out the windows when they're running through the hallway looks cool. It feels like it's out in space. It feels big. This is the first story they did that was entirely shot in the studio, 100%. It's all the spaceship. It's all the Ark in space. There's a special edition version of this story, which it's interesting. All they really did was they just replaced all the space shots, the model shots, with CGI shots of the Ark, which I just feel are completely unnecessary because the model shots actually look totally solid. They look like space, and the Ark looks cool, so I have no complaints there. It's just a very impressive, good-looking story that features some kind of dated and wonky practical effects, but overall sells the mood and the horror of it really well. So I like the effects. I like the effects in the story. I wouldn't change anything. Okay, so let's get into the meat of the story itself. This story is incredibly economical about its storytelling. Just watching the first episode specifically, it really struck me how well utilized every beat of the plot is. It lays the groundwork for everything to come and ties it all together very nicely. They get on the ship and it's damaged for some reason, and there's a lack of oxygen. Lack of oxygen is a major theme throughout the entire story. It becomes a threat. It becomes a strategy between the villains and the heroes. The oxygen is messed up because the wires have been cut. Why have the wires been cut? Ooh, you're seeding a mystery. That's going to be answered in a very meaningful way later in the story. We managed to fix the wires, but now that's activated the electric trap. Oh no. And you watch it first, you're like, okay, yeah, it's just another thing for the Doctor and Harry to avoid another action set piece, a danger. But it later ties in a really meaningful and specific way because the Doctor does the mind meld with the remains of the Wirrn mother, and we see that that exact electric trap that threatens them is what hit her and put her into a life or death survival mode, where she had to go and just find Dune, find the technician really fast, plant her egg, and go die in the cupboard. They then find the body, which is a great stinger for the first episode, as well as being the third clue that they find. Meanwhile, Sarah gets teleported from the rest cot that she was put on, and you get the first VO of the Chancellor that's giving you a lot of mysterious exposition. You want to know more about what the hell they're talking about.
This is the High Minister speaking on behalf of the World Executive. I salute you who are about to make the supreme sacrifice.
It starts to set the groundwork of what the stakes are of the story. This is the last of humanity. This is a grand, important mission that humanity has been sent on. And then Sarah gets put into the cryogenic chamber, and so we're directly tying it into the setting and into the stakes of the world. The whole first episode is just designed to establish and enrich the dynamic between our hero characters, constantly establish the world building, establish threats, establish what the dangers are in this location, and seed multiple mysteries. In pretty much every moment of the story, there's a new mystery being presented. Why is there no oxygen? Why is the cords cut? Why is there an electric defense system? Why is Sarah being put into a cryogenic freezing process? Why is there a weird Chancellor voice talking about the importance of what you're doing, the great sacrifice you've made. And all of these mysteries and questions get satisfying answers doled out over the course of the next 3 episodes. The answers to the mystery tie into what's at stake and what the threat is, and what the theme is of the story really well. It just feels like there's no wasted moments, there's no flabby dialogue, there's no filler in the story. Every character has an important part to play, every character represents something meaningful, everything ties together nicely. The Wirrn, later in the story, constantly are using the threat of reducing or depleting the oxygen to try to force the humans to come out and surrender. The cot that Sarah gets teleported on in the first episode ends up being a key tool of survival for the heroes later in the story. The electric thing they fight at the beginning of the story ends up being a key backstory element of what happened to the Wirrn and why they ended up being there in the first place the way they did, and why they weren't able to immediately enact their plan. Everything fits together and echoes back on itself. I think that's part of what makes the story so enjoyable. And it slowly builds dread throughout. The Wirrn are an interesting, creepy threat, an insect-like creature that can not just kill you, but literally absorb your whole being, your personality, your emotions, your memories, your knowledge into themselves, to the point where if you become a part of that, you're going to be getting confused during the process and thinking you are the other person who got absorbed a while ago when Noah thinks he's doomed. It's a very creepy moment, because it just hammers home the idea of that creepy alien hive mind, that body horror that's like they don't just kill you, they absorb you and become a part of them. It's a cool idea. And then when we eventually learn the backstory of the Wirrn, humanity, tried to survive. They sent out this ark, but there were also other groups of humans they mentioned throughout the story that tried to go out and colonize other planets. And apparently, as humans tend to do, they went out and found a place they could colonize that was already inhabited. So what did they do? They killed everyone. They destroyed the Wirrn's hatchery horrifically and drove them off of their home planet into space. The Wirrn end up having a very understandable motivation as to what they're doing, why they're doing it, why they specifically targeted humans, why they want to not just take over Earth and have a new place, but they want to absorb all the knowledge and destroy the humans that are here. They have a bone to pick. They have a revenge that they just emotionally need to enact because of the atrocities and genocide that was visited upon them by humanity. So even though, we're still rooting for the humans and these people on the Ark didn't specifically have anything to do with that atrocity that the Wirrn experienced, you still can understand and sympathize with the Wirrn after hearing the backstory of what happened to them. Even the mother, the doctor talks about how she took an incredible act of will to fight back death in order to plant her egg before she died. Even though what she did was horrific from our point of view, it's still somewhat respectful. You feel a little bit of empathy, you feel a little bit of sympathy for the Wirrn mother, and you feel kind of like, damn, she gave her all for the survival of her race.
Found the queen in the cupboard.
Amazing willpower. I could feel it struggling against death until its task was done.
Robert Holmes is good at doing that. He's good at making his bug-eyed aliens have a soul. The theme of this story, which is the indomitable nature of humanity, is beautifully showcased and built upon throughout the entire story. It starts out with the doctor when he first finds the cryogenic chamber, and he makes that big speech about how impressive humanity is and how no matter what challenge or danger arises, we will always eventually pull together and fight for survival and to advance our race. And he describes us as indomitable, which is awesome. And then it moves from that to the middle of the story, to the beginning of the third episode, which begins with the reveal of the alien bubble wrap arm that Noah's left hand has become. Very artfully, I would say. The story starts with that stinger, that reveal from the end of the last episode, but instead of propelling the plot forward with more action, it has this very pensive, almost sacred moment where the Chancellor's voice comes over the intercom and makes this big, impassioned speech about the great weight of responsibility and the awe-inspiring power that humanity has, and how the people who are the survivors of Space Station Nerva have this great journey ahead of them of rebuilding humanity, rebuilding society.
The fact that you are hearing my voice in a message recorded thousands of years before the day in which you are now living is a sure sign that our great undertaking, the salvation of the human race, has been rewarded with success.
And it's a really cool moment because you just have this VO and you just get to watch all of the actors react to the speech. You have Wirrn there and she almost becomes sort of entranced by the speech. She walks forward and you can tell on her face that she's taking all this in and she's thinking about this great weight on her shoulders and how important it is that she survives and that she brings her people to safety. Then you have the doctor there. He's fascinated by watching her because, as he stated it in his earlier speech, he loves humanity. It clearly lays out that he is an alien who is not of the human race, but he appreciates and respects us. And so he is watching her take this in, and you can tell that he sees the effect the speech is having on her. So that's really interesting. And then you cut to Noah, and Noah, even though he has alien monster hand on, you can tell he is also being taken in by this speech. You know, this was his leader who chose him to be the new leader for the new world, to bring humanity into a new golden age. And it's coming back to him, and it's almost pushing away maybe some of the darkness and the evil alien Wirrn mind parasite that's happening there, and he is becoming reacquainted with his humanity through this speech. And when the speech ends, it's almost like it lights a fire in his heart. It reignites his passion to fulfill his mission and save humanity, and he actively fights with his bubble wrap arm, and in spite of the wonky special effects, it's a very moving moment. These are all reiterations of the main theme of the story. There's the moment where even when Noah has transformed completely into a wasp-like creature, a Wirrn, he implores Wirrn to leave humanity and escape herself because he still has that piece of humanity as well, which is the love he has for the woman that he was meant to be with. So there is a bit of romanticism in that moment, which is Wirrn, shot away earlier, but clearly it's still a part of the human DNA and the human psyche, what it means to be human. And then there's the part later where the doctor passionately implores whatever part of humanity is left in Noah's psyche to lead the Wirrn away from Earth, out in space to find another planet. He tries to remind him of the sunshine shining in his face and the way it felt to be human. And even though he says, I don't remember any of that, the way the music plays and the way the cinematography pans in, and even though he's a puppet, alien bug guy, it's still broadcast to you that he's being touched by that. He's thinking about it.
Remember the wind and the sun, the fields, the blue sky. That's Earth, Noah. It's for the human race. Don't abandon it.
So when it finally comes around to the end of the story where Noah leads the Wirrn onto the escape craft and they fly into space and he neglects to adjust the settings in the ship so it explodes and he says goodbye to Wirrn before he dies.
Goodbye, Wirrn.
Shuttle's blown up. He must have known that would happen.
It just beautifully ties together the point of the story, the whole theme of humanity, even in the darkest and most desperate and horrific of circumstances, overcoming adversity and striving to fight for the greater good and fight to save humanity as a whole. So Noah ends up dying a hero and redeeming himself. And even though he turned into this evil alien monster that at times was trying to destroy humanity, he still had that shred of humanity. There was just enough left to bring him around and have him do the right thing at the right moment, the most important moment. So I feel like all the speeches that are given and the very character-centric moments all dovetail together into this really beautiful, perfect, nice little bow tied off at the end of the story. So it just all works really well together. It's a very tightly written story. It's a great story. I know I've been kind of gushing over this story. I haven't really complained about anything. I haven't pointed out plot holes. There really aren't any. I really don't have any qualms with this story. I think it's really well written. It's solid. It has no fat to it. It's very tight. It's creepy. It has a building sense of dread. It has great character moments both for the main cast and for the guest characters. We get to see a lot of cool new shades of alienness and kind of surprising, unexpected turns from the Doctor himself. This is Philip Hinchcliffe's statement of purpose. This is what he wants to do. He wants to do a more grounded, more mature, less wobbly sets, more character-centric, more horror-centric, deeper version of Doctor Who. And I feel like this episode is the true start of the Hinchcliffe era, where his vision really has a chance to shine. It went through a few writers, the story. Like, they rewrote it a few times. He fortunately was able to land on Robert Holmes, who's just a very seasoned, high-quality Doctor Who writer who just seems like he really gets Doctor Who. I think they have visions that meld well together. So in conclusion, Ark in Space is awesome. I give it an A. A for Ark in Space. The bubble wrap, even though it's dated and looks kind of goofy, I feel like it adds to the charm. And I feel like it's impressive and interesting. There's this weird thing with your brain when you're watching, you're like, oh, it's the bubble wrap. I know that, but it's also really horrific and weird and alien. And they're taking it deadly serious, so I guess I'm buying it? I guess I'm buying it. That's how good this is. That's how good the story is. A. Ark in Space is an A. Watch it. Next episode. Ooh, the next story is the very first Doctor Who story I ever saw when I was an 8-year-old boy. It's the one that my dad decided to leave on after the end of Upstairs Downstairs on WCW Chicago. The Sontaran Experiment. This is a good one. This is a classic. It's not as awesome as the story that precedes it or the story that follows, but it's a really nice, fun, breezy, middle of the season story. It's only 2 episodes long, which is a bit of an odd duck. It's a bit weird. The only 2-episode story in Tom Baker's run, and one of only a handful of 2-episode stories in all of classic Doctor Who. It's got some spooky moments. It's dark, but not too dark. It's really just some wacky Sontaran shenanigans. First time I ever saw that space corridor and that base and heard the music, it's really going to bring things back for me. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for the Sontaran Experiment. That's about it. So until next time, Kay, signing out. No! No! What are you doing? What do you want? What are you typing in? What devilly scheme do you have? Bubble wrap ASMR video. No, I hate ASMR videos. I hate them. No. This is actually kind of relaxing.